Welcome to Asian American Life. I'm your host, Ernabel DeMillo. This month, we're checking in on the world-famous New York Children's Orchestra Society, still reeling after Hurricane Ida rolled into their neighborhood. We'll have their story, but first, here's a look at what's ahead on this edition of Asian American Life. Finding peace, Black-Asian solidarity. Soulmates, creating fashionable footwear one step at a time. Kitchen-to-table cookware for the holiday season. And sustainable, edible insects that's changing the way we eat. This and more on Asian American Life. The artistic and music director of the Children's Orchestra Society spent the summer hopeful. He was looking forward to the return of his students after months on Zoom. But days before their first in-person orientation, disaster struck.
Deadly flooding cripples the tri-state. More than 20 lives have been lost, entire neighborhoods underwater.
On September 1st, the remnants of Hurricane Ida barreled into the tri-state, unleashing flash floods. Streets turned into rivers, water rushed into homes.
It started very innocently. I was watching television upstairs, and the rain came down, and there was a flash flood warning.
Within minutes of that first warning, Michael Daddup's street looked like a lake. This was video he took that night. As the water rose, Daddup, the longtime music director of the New York-based Children's Orchestra Society, could only watch as his family's life's work washed away.
And the following morning, we surveyed and everything was completely destroyed.
1 month later, Daddup and his wife Yo Cheng Ma are still cleaning up. There's still a giant tent outside their house filled with memorabilia they're hoping to save. But so much was lost. For the last 38 years, their Queens home was also the home office for the Children's Orchestra Society, also known as CAUSE. Daddup took us on a tour of their basement. It's hard to imagine that there was once a thriving music studio and office here.
Materially speaking, we lost just about everything what I have in the office, and 2 grand pianos and all the musical pieces that were thousands of scores and everything, and the entire studio electronic equipments.
The material loss they estimate is in the hundreds of thousands, but many of the items gone you can't put a price on. Precious instruments like a childhood cello, the thousands of compositions lost, and almost 40 years of memories.
Our school, our livelihood, our passion of bringing music and teaching music to young people was all washed out.
CAUSE has a long and rich history. It was founded in 1962 by Yo Cheng Ma's father, Dr. H.T. Ma. Yo Cheng was a music prodigy growing up, along with her very famous brother, the cellist Yo-Yo Ma. In fact, the siblings made their American debut in front of an audience that included President John F. Kennedy.
Congratulations to you both.
Yo Cheng, who is also a pediatrician, took over as executive director in 1984. Her husband, Michael Daddup, a well-known guitarist, composer, and conductor from the Philippines, became music director. The couple continued her father's mission.
He really wanted children to play together and to improve themselves.
During our interview, another storm rolled in, so we had to take cover under the tent. The rain almost sounding like a timpani as they spoke about their former students coming back to help.
We are a family, and we never realized it so much as right now. All the alum who came physically to help us, all the alum who came from out of the woodwork, we haven't heard from them for years, but they donated money to help us, and it touches us to the bottom of our heart.
Some 5,000 children have been a part of CAUSE, learning and embracing classical music and performing on some of the biggest stages with some of the genre's most famous stars. But the kids haven't performed on a stage for almost 2 years because of COVID. Instead, they've been taking lessons and performing on Zoom. There's still a lot of work ahead, and it may seem daunting at times, but the couple remain optimistic. As the saying goes, the show must go on.
I'm very hopeful, and I'm always thinking about the children, the faces of the children, that aha moment when they learn. That gives me a lot of hope that we must not surrender to this distraction, but rather we should get stronger and rebuild better so that we can serve more children in the future.
I'm Ernabel DeMillo for Asian American Life.
When anti-Asian hate spiked in the midst of a global pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, a dancer stood up and organized the Blasian March to show solidarity between Blacks and Asians.
At the Blasian March, we center celebration. We do our best to center joy and healing, and that looks like using the performing arts.
We are the people. Say it louder.
Dancer Rohan Zo Lee started the Blasian March to show solidarity between Black, Asian, and LGBTQ communities, and to share a history of allyship seldom told.
Black power! Black power! Asian power! Asian power! My name is Rohan, and I am an Asian American.
Thinking about civil rights history and how we never talk about the Asian American contribution to that. We don't think about Grace Lee Boggs, who organized with Martin Luther King and her Black husband James. We don't think about Yuri Kochiyama, who also is a great friend of Malcolm X, or even Kiyoshi Kuromiya, who was an openly gay activist who also marched with King on Selma, and in 1970 was on the only openly gay panelist at the Black Panther Party convention.
In some ways, Rohan, who goes by the pronoun they, embodies allyship and intersectionality.
So intersectionality, it comes from the intellectual Black woman Kimberly Crenshaw. The way I experience it is kind of acknowledging how your identity is layered and multifaceted. So for me, for example, it's queer, Black, Asian. Those are three separate categories that intersect to create a unique experience.
The U.S. population with intersecting identities has jumped. According to the 2020 census, Americans who identify as multiracial is at 34 million. Up from 9 million just 10 years ago. That's a 276% spike. Rohan grew up in a Chinese-Jamaican household but found strength in their Filipino identity in college. This journey of self-discovery is what drives Rohan to encourage others to speak their truth.
I want to remind the community that through our intersectional struggle comes our intersectional power. And through intersectional power comes intersectional joy. I hope that you felt that today.
I think for me, I drew a lot of power from my Filipino identity because one, I had discovered it alongside my queer journey. I started to understand my sexuality at the same time as learning I was of Filipino descent. My body has inherited the Filipino diaspora. It has inherited the Black resistance in the Caribbean and in the States. It has inherited the Chinese resistance in the States, in some ways. I have no problem saying Black power. I have no problem saying Asian power, because I know that my story is a story of resistance and a story of power.
For Asian American Life, I'm Rainer Ramirez.
Asian American entrepreneurs are visionaries in many fields, including one Japanese American artisan in Brooklyn who's helping others to find their souls in handcrafting shoes.
From form and fabric to design and construction, handcrafted shoemaking is an art. Handcrafting shoes flourished in the 18th century when cobblers made custom pairs. These days, most shoes are mass-produced in factories overseas, but here at the Brooklyn Shoe Space in Williamsburg, people learn to make their own.
When I started shoemaking and learning, there was nothing out there like a hub or a knowledge or some pool of people or resources.
Keiko Hirosue Korolev started making shoes as a hobby in her spare time while working in the world of corporate fashion.
I was wearing the shoes that I made. I had designer friends who were telling me, those are really great shoes. Where did you get them? I made it myself, and they were like, I want to learn how to make.
And much like a knitting circle, Keiko started a shoemaking circle. That small group grew to a large collective in 2014 where members came to learn and make, among them brand name designers.
The brands came to us wanting, I think, for the designers or the production people to understand the construction of footwear.
Keiko left her corporate job to run the Brooklyn Shoe Collective, becoming a part of the Makers Movement, a cultural trend that encourages people to make what they need. A meaningful concept in the U.S. footwear industry, which has the largest market in the world, yet manufactures less than 2% of shoes.
That's what I can do over here, is just to keep on promoting shoemaking and maybe close the gap between the industry and the makers.
Now here, you want to do this one straight.
Although Keiko was forced to close the collective when the pandemic hit, she continues to teach in her new studio, where women and men, young and old, come to create. Students like Andrew Grayson, who wants to bring his design dreams to life.
I've been wanting to design sneakers for like a big company since I was in middle school. And the idea of actually like creating a shoe was just like, I couldn't fathom it. So I've just been sketching a lot and like designing it from like my mind. But to actually bring it to reality, that's why I came here.
Miriam Sarag from Egypt came to learn how to make a prototype for her business concept of a high heel that converts to a low heel.
You get to learn a lot, not only from your process, but other people's processes.
And for other students like Lorna Flynn, shoemaking is a chance to learn something new.
There's a lot more work that goes into it than you would imagine.
More than 200 steps to be precise. I got the abbreviated lesson, which starts with the form of your shoe called a last. From the last, a pattern is made. Using that pattern, material is cut, sewn, stretched over the last, and then the sole is applied. Students use Keiko's impressive equipment, which includes an extensive last collection and sewing machines that date back to the early 1900s. From start to finish, Keiko says her students create their basic cemented footwear in 5 days. For more on all the Brooklyn Shoe Space has to offer, check out brooklynshoespace.com. For Asian American Life, I'm Susan Jun.
I'm Kyung Yoon. A new breed of Asian American entrepreneurs are launching businesses that are reimagining what it means to be rooted in their community. I spoke with the co-founders of Material Kitchen, who are cooking up a new kind of business. When longtime friends Eunice Byun and David Nguyen decided to launch a kitchenware company in New York City 4 years ago, they had no professional experience with cooking or starting a company. What they did have was a love of food, design, and function.
Dave and I grew up in families where food and the kitchen were really the center of the home. So we like to think about how can we kind of create that atmosphere based on the very tools that we are bringing into your home.
That idea bloomed into Material Kitchen, a direct-to-consumer brand that offers high-quality yet affordable products that can take the heat in the kitchen while looking great. David brought to the startup his background in the luxury industry, where he had for years led business planning for brands like Chanel and Valentino, while Eunice most recently headed global digital marketing for Revlon. Beyond their business backgrounds, the co-founders say their personal histories and heritage as children of immigrants have shaped their company culture.
My parents were boat people, so what that meant for them was they left the country, Vietnam, in 1978. As with a lot of refugees, they came in with almost no money in the country. They just had to build their lives from scratch. And so I think it really gave me appreciation of how hard they worked, and also grateful for the country that gave my parents these opportunities.
Eunice, meanwhile, grew up in Kansas, where her parents made a living running a Chinese restaurant.
I actually grew up with kind of the consummate small business Korean American family where you don't take any vacations because your parents are always tending to the business and always working. So when Dave and I first started, there was a lot of apprehension around, is it just going to be that? Is it going to be taking up all of our time, but ultimately we don't know how to tap into this big world of venture funding, or the very, I think, glamorized world of startups that now exists.
But by leveraging their business backgrounds and connections in different industries, David and Eunice were able to forge a different path from their parents. They represent a new and empowered generation of Asian American entrepreneurs who are giving voice to their unique stories and values.
We want to be a company that stands for something that's lasting. So I think creating something of substance is really a guiding principle. And I think the second thing is just being a company that honors traditions.
And traditions of cooking and eating together as a way to bind communities is deeply embedded in the values of Material Kitchen.
My mom always had a standing rule that we always had to have dinner together as a family, no matter what. Whether we had baseball practice at a certain time, we always had to be home for dinner together.
For us, it was always making mandu, because my mom, or actually at the time, my harmony, my grandmother, would make the filling and plop that right at the center of the table. Having miyeokguk for your birthday, a seaweed soup. And now what's great is I have 2 young girls that I can carry through that tradition, and every year for their birthday, make the same type of seaweed soup that my mom used to make for me.
The company also sees itself as being rooted in giving back to the community. Material Kitchen regularly supports organizations that lift up underserved neighbors in their communities.
Every year we have a campaign called Kinder Kitchens, and we're always thinking about how can we bring awareness to issues that our community cares about and that we ourselves as leaders care about.
The co-founders say they want to keep building a business that celebrates and gives voice to the diversity of their community and find new ways to support it. I'm Kyung Yoon for Asian American Life. I'm Kyung Yoon. In honor of Veterans Day, we shine a light this month on Asian American war heroes who served their country with honor and bravery. Jose Nisperos was a private in the U.S. Army's 34th Company of the Philippine Scouts in 1911. Although severely wounded in battle, he fought off rebel forces until they retreated, saving many lives. He was the first Filipino to receive the Medal of Honor. Joe Hayashi was a private in the U.S. Army's 442nd Regimental Combat Team during World War II. He single-handedly silenced 3 machine gun posts and was killed in action. He was awarded a Medal of Honor posthumously by President Bill Clinton. Chu In Lee was a lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps during the Korean War. He ventured out on a dangerous one-man reconnaissance mission in 1950 and is credited with saving thousands of men. Daniel Inoue, a second lieutenant with the 442nd Regimental Combat Team during World War II, destroyed 2 machine gun posts and continued to fight after being wounded in action. He later went on to serve as a U.S. Senator from Hawaii from 1963 until his death in 2012. This Veterans Day, we salute these heroes and all Asian American veterans who proudly served and defended our country.
I'm Minnie Rowe. If you consider yourself an adventurous eater or maybe a bit of a foodie, you may want to consider adding bugs to your next meal. Now, many of us may shudder at the thought of eating bugs, but in many cultures, especially in Asia,
bugs are considered a great source of protein, not to mention a culinary delight.
In 2021, billions of cicadas made their dramatic appearance to blanket the eastern United States with their song, and eventually their carcasses. To many, Brood 10 cicadas were simply a nuisance, but to others like Joseph Yoon, they are a sought-after delicacy that he's waited patiently for 17 years to prepare and consume.
So I think about the specialness of cicadas and I try to pair it with the most special ingredient I could think of. And so I was like, oh, springtime, ramps, kimchi, cicada nymphs.
Nice.
Joseph Yoon is a chef and the founder of Brooklyn Bugs, whose mission is educating the public to raise awareness and appreciation for eating insects.
We just don't know how to think about eating insects. We have no clue. We just think about the whole insect, and they think about insects as a pest. Insects are arthropods, just like lobsters and shrimp and crab. In over 80% of the nations around the world, people regularly consume insects as a part of their daily sustenance.
Yoon's array of raw ingredients all come from FDA-approved facilities and are farmed specifically for human consumption. He incorporates bugs into foods from all four corners of the world. Cicada nymph guacamole, Italian meatballs made of mealworms, stir-fries, maki hand rolls, and several mouth-watering kimchi, including this one, made with scorpions.
In Korea, where I'm from, they would regularly eat grasshoppers and silkworm pupa. And in China, wow, they eat so many wildly different species of insects, everything from beetles to centipedes to the larvae. In fact, there are over 2,000 species of edible insects around the world, and it's incredible because they have wildly different flavor profiles, different textures, different functionalities when cooking.
And don't be fooled by their tiny bodies, which are 60 to 75% protein by weight.
They're packed with micro and macronutrients, and they have lots of vitamins and minerals.
And they're environmentally friendly, endorsed by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations as a viable option for sustainable protein, especially as food insecurity continues to rise, with the Earth's population predicted to reach 9 billion by 2050. This 2013 report shows crickets need 6 times less feed than cattle, 4 times less than sheep, and twice less than pigs and broiler chickens to produce the same amount of protein. It also emits less greenhouse gases and ammonia than conventional livestock.
If we were to consider eating insects just once a week, even that would have a great impact on the environment.
Yoon admits that the barrier to entry is high for the average home chef. He suggests incorporating bugs into your favorite dishes.
It's not like, eat these bugs, like this whole big bowl full of bugs every day, every meal, because I think that's what people think. And so it's like, hey, you don't even have to look at this bug. You could add the cricket powder into the pizza dough. You could add it into the marinara sauce. You could add it as a topping.
If you're up for more of a challenge, try sprinkling black ants over a dish for a burst of flavor.
And black ants have formic acid as a defense mechanism, so it gives it this like fermented, tangy, sort of like citrus flavor and smell. One of the classic ways I like to add it is like with guacamole.
Or a spoonful on a slice of cucumber as a refreshing canapé.
All right, let's try this. Okay.
Yoon then cooked an entire Asian meal of bugs, beginning with miso soup flavored with cricket powder. His special Ramp Brood 10 cicada kimchi. Stir-fried locusts with vegetables over rice, which, to be honest, was slightly intimidating, but when sautéed with soy and mirin, it tasted almost like a crunchy shellfish.
Yeah, I mean, it just becomes part of food and becomes a texture, becomes part of the flavor.
Yoon knows it's an uphill battle before bugs are considered mainstream.
Sometimes friends would text me or send me a picture like, hey, look, there's a bug in my salad, should I eat it? I'm like, guys, you're completely missing the point, because that is a bug you don't want to eat. It's not like we're just going around trying to eat any old bug that's flying around.
But he's working tirelessly to shift the public perception from sensationalism to one of widespread acceptance.
I can't even tell you how many friends have said that to me, where they're like, you know, I really never thought that I would ever be interested in eating insects, and I'm ready. And so that brings me such great, it makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing.
And bugs aren't just for main courses, but can also be used in desserts as well, like this, what's this called again?
Cricket tiramisu with matcha, black ants, and palm weevils.
Ooh, that sounds delightful.
Bon appetit.
Thank you. A mini row for Asian American life.
That's our show for now. If you want to learn more about these stories, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Asian American Life. On behalf of Team Asian American Life, we wish you a safe and happy holiday season. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo. We'll see you next time.